Hey guys! Today we're going to be looking at all kinds of particles, particles on static meshes, particles on skeletal meshes, ribbon particles, sprite particles. So let's get started. So the first thing is if I go into my plugins under FX, we have both of these plugins enabled. I already went ahead and did that. It will ask you to restart the project and give you a warning that this is a beta version as of 4/21. You'll hit yes, and then you can get started. So I'm going to be very organized and make a new folder called FX and keep all of my particle related files in here. So I'm just going to go ahead and make a simple particle. We need an emitter. And we also need a system. I'm going to make an empty system. So an emitter is where the particle is actually happening. This is where the action is. And a system contains one or more emitters. So you cannot have a standalone emitter. All emitters must be contained by a system. So this is our emitter editor. If you are getting used to how Unreal functions with the mouse, you might not like this preview, so I'm going to take off this orbit mode, and then it will feel like much more normal Unreal. I also really don't like this background. I find it distracting. So if I go to Window, Preview Scene Settings, I can just turn that off. Much better. Okay, and now I just have your basic run-of-the-mill fountain particle system that just runs and runs. So I'm going to add this into my system. So I'm going to look for that emitter. Oops. And there we go. So I'll compile and save. I'm going to make a new level because I think particles look best in darkness. So for today, I'm going to show it off here. So if I just drag the system in, we get particles, and if I hit play, I have a bunch of particles. And of course, we could bring them in procedurally. So if I open up a level blueprint, I can add the Niagara component. And we need to just set which system we're using. Particle. Great. So I have that particle. All right, so a little bit more fun. We can do this on a key press. Where is it? Did I pass it? Yep. Right there. There we go. So every time I hit the key P, we're going to have a new Niagara component, and we set our system right here. So if I hit P, and so we have multiple systems, but they're all in the same place. So if we wanted to spread them around a little bit, I can just break this up. I'm going to make a location vector. And I'm just going to assign this random numbers just to spread it out a little bit. We don't want to give the same random number to each axis, then we're going to have like this weird diagonal. So we want different random numbers for X, Y, and Z. I'll just do 0. It's fine. So now every time I hit the P key, we're going to get a new particle system in different places. Particles, 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 tons and tons of particles. Very exciting. All right, so now that we have this basic run-of-the-mill fountain particle system, it'd be nice to have a little more complexity. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a static mesh. So in my emitter, we're going to use these parameters right here. So we're going to add a static mesh parameter. So we're going to search for static mesh and give that a much better name. And we're going to bring that in to our variables. So if I bring in my static mesh, where'd it go? Here we go. I have my static mesh right here. And now I can set the static mesh. So I'm going to look for cone. If you don't see anything when you type in cone, you want to make sure under view options that the plugin content is checked off and or the engine content. All right, so I have my cone and it doesn't look like a cone yet, but we will get there. So we're going to delete this calculate size by mass, this add velocity, and the gravity force. All of these were to create that fountain effect, which I no longer need. So now I just have all of these kind of floating orbs right here. The other thing I want to do is a spawn rate. This made sense for a fountain because we want particles to be created over time. But for this particular example, I just want all of my particles right at once, all at the same time. So I'm going to delete this and use the spawn burst instantaneous. And we'll use, I don't know, like 1,500 particles. That sounds nice. Okay. So I have a bunch of particles. They're all coming in at the same time, but it definitely does not look like a cone. So we're going to use a module script. And there we go. And we'll call this like cone spawn. All right, great. So we're going to add in that static mesh. Make new static mesh. All right. And then we are going to connect this to get try position. So we're going to get different positions from our mesh and set it to particles.position. So our problem is our particles are unaware that they're supposed to position themselves on top of this mesh. And to get these coordinates, we're just going to take random coordinates from the mesh and assign them. So each particle will get a random place on the static mesh, and then it will be assigned its position. We also want to give this a category. It doesn't matter what you name it, just as long as you remember the category. We're going to need it in just a minute. All right, that looks good to me. So if we go back into our emitter, under spawn, this is where that name comes in handy. So there's cone right here. And we are going to add this to our stack. So this entire entity on my right-hand side, this is our stack. So it's executing all of this code. And so while it doesn't have any exposed variables, it's going to execute all of this code for us, which is very convenient. Oh, and you know what? No wonder it's not happy. It doesn't have the right name. There we go. All right, so we'll let this compile. So I'm going to have all of these particles on a cone. There it is, so nice. One, I don't really like how it's fading. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this lifetime a little bit longer, this range here. And if I go under color, I can see that the color, while it starts as white, then goes to completely transparent. So I'm going to change the opacity. All right, so now it lasts a little bit longer. No, we can change the opacity. Let's just keep it a little bit longer. There we go. Yeah, that's better. All right, we'll play with that a little bit more in a minute. So I have this system of particles. They're all chilling on this mesh, and I really want some sort of like explosion or like a whoosh kind of thing to happen. So how I'm going to accomplish this is I'm going to add what's called a curve for float, and I'm also going to use my parameters right here. So if I look for a curve for floats, I'll just call this curve. We're going to add this to our variables. And when it's done compiling, we get this little curve window. So I'm going to, right at 0.6, add a key, make that 0. And then right at the end, let's give this a huge value. We'll zoom to fit that. All right, great. And then in my particle update, I'm going to be using this curl noise force. And it's angry because it's looking for the solves forces and velocity after this. So we're just going to drag this up here. Now it's happy. So this noise strength, I don't want this to happen all at once. I want this to be a little more interesting and not just have this like uniform noise strength. So I'm also going to look for a curve from, there we go, float from curve. All right, so let's add a key. So at time 0, it's 0. And this will be 0 right at 0.6. And then let's make it a little more exciting right here. Great. So let's make this. And then we'll bring it back. And to be able to see the entire curve, we're going to do the zoom to fit vertical. All right, let's compile, apply, save. And if we hit play, it's chilling, and now it starts to disperse. And if we really want to have a little more fun with this, in our colors, what we can do, I'm going to make this, ooh, let's remove this one. So it doesn't dissolve right away. I'm going to bring this over, and let's make this like blue. And then right at 0.6, it's still going to be blue. And then it's going to fade into pink. Great. Okay. So right at 0.6, and this represents 100% of the lifetime of the particle. So our particles vary in their lifetime between 3 and 4.5 seconds. So if the particle has a lifetime of 3 seconds, this is second 0, and this represents second 3. Same with our curves. If we're saying the time is from 0 to 1, 0 being second 0, and t equals 1 is second 3. All right, and of course, if the particle lifetime was 4.5 instead of 3, this would represent 4.5 seconds. All right, so I'm going to compile, apply, and save. And if we hit play, we have this blue triangle and the pink particles. So the particles turn pink and kind of have this nice little noise effect simultaneously. And we have some numbers we can play with, like there's noise frequency here. We can give this different values, see what happens. And we can just try different numbers, see what we like. Let's try one more. Oh, no, I don't like that either. All right, we're gonna stick with this. Okay, great. So I have this fun little triangle, goes pink. It's already set up in our system. Sometimes if it doesn't update exactly as you were expecting, I'm imagining this is some sort of bug since this is still in beta. They did warn us. I just re-add it. That usually solves the problem. There we go. And now it's pink. Great. And if I hit play and hit P, now I have all these triangles that explode into pink particles. It's like really, And that's fun. All right, fun. So I have particles that can attach themselves to static meshes, so it makes sense that we could also attach these particles to skeletal meshes. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new emitter, and we'll just use the fountain as our template. And I'm going to make a new system as well. All right, great. So I have a new system and a new emitter. So let's open up our emitter. And what we want to do is we're going to add this initialize sprite reproduction. And this is going to give us access to a skeletal mesh. So this is where we're going to be inputting that skeletal mesh. And I already imported an avatar with some animation. So I'm going to be using Tyler today, Tyler, our dancing machine. If you get the CPU access error, if you just hit fix now, that will go away. And we also want to create an update mesh reproduction sprite. And we also want to use Tyler. So you want to have the same avatar skeletal mesh here as you do here. All right, so we will compile, apply, and save. And again, we don't want to have the spawn rate. We really want to have this burst instantaneous. And we'll use like 10,000 for this one. And I'm just going to make this uniform, make this 5 seconds, which is how long the loop duration is. All right, great. And now we have Tyler. Wonderful. I'm going to change the color, and I don't want this to fade out this time. So we're just going to make one color. And let's do... that's fun. All right, let's do this color. Great. And if I remove this key, it's just always going to be teal. All right, so pretty simple. All I did here was just add this initialized mesh reproduction sprite in particle spawn and my update mesh reproduction sprite. So quick thing about the particle spawn section and the particle update section. So if you're used to processing P5 Arduino, you often have a part of code that is called once, your initialize function. So this is initialize. This happens the very first frame of your scene. And then we have particle update, and this is called every frame afterwards. All right. And I don't need this calculate size by mass, I don't need this add velocity, and I don't need any gravity force. So I still have Tyler just hanging out, doing a T-pose. So I'm going to go ahead and add this emitter to our new system. And we have Tyler. Wonderful. And I can bring Tyler out into the world, and if I hit play, I have Tyler. But it would be a lot more fun if Tyler was moving. So what we're going to do is we are going to bring in this animation file of Tyler dancing. So we're going to drag this into the world. The first thing I want to do is I don't want to actually see the avatar. I don't need to see the blonde hair and the red shirt. None of that's necessary. So I'm going to check off this visible. The other thing that I want is I want this always ticks pose and refresh bones turned on. So in my skeletal mesh, I need a way to be able to set this animation. So we have this override parameters, so it'd be really nice if I had access to the skeletal mesh here. So in my system, I'm going to create a user variable. And this will be for the skeletal mesh. Let's give this a better name. So the variables that I create here, this user skeletal mesh, these will be available to me not only in the details panel, but also in Blueprints. So we will be using these later in Blueprints. And so I'm going to tie this skeletal mesh to my skeletal mesh that's initialized and my skeletal mesh that is updated. And we will compile save. So now I have access to the skeletal mesh. So I'm going to set this to Tyler. And my source, this is going to be my animation. And because Tyler dancing animation file is already in the world outliner, I have access to it. And all of the particles immediately go to that animation file. So I'm going to hit save and play. And now I have Dancing Tyler covered in about 10,000 particles. It's pretty cool. So I would also like to get the sort of mini tiny explosion that we did with our static mesh. So I'll bring in a couple of those so we remember. So this nice sort of like pink dissolve, I don't know what you want to call it, like a whoosh, like in a little mini explosion. I would like to bring that into my avatar. So I'm already using this. If we go back to our emitter, in the update, I'm doing this update mesh reproduction sprite, so I can't have curl noise force and my update mesh reproduction sprite competing with each other. So I'm going to need to have a separate emitter. So if I go back into my particles folder, I'm going to take my emitter that I used to create this guy right here, and I'm going to make a copy. And I'm going to call this shadow. I'm going to open up shadow, and instead of having this update reproduction sprite, I'm going to use that curl noise force. And again, it's angry because it's looking for solve forces and velocity, so we're going to bring this above because the stack happens from the bottom, or excuse me, from the top to the bottom. We can already see starting to get a little wonky. Woo! And just for fun, I'm going to add a curve in here. I'm going to do a similar curve to what we did with the cone. So I'm going to add a key, make this 0. And I don't know why I'm doing everything at 0.6 today, but I am. And then we'll bring it back. All right, great. So let's compile this. And now it does this like fun little explosion. So I'm gonna, if I don't want it to be still too long, this will be kind of like a shadow left behind. I can always just bring this over. And it will start to kind of break up a little bit quicker. And of course, you can always play with the noise frequency. See what this does. So this really just dissolves the particles, which can always be fun. So we'll try that. Okay, so I'm going to bring this emitter into my system that has the original emitter. So we can have multiple emitters in the same system. So I'm going to look for that shadow. There we go. And I'm also going to want to set this user skeletal mesh. Great. And there we go. So if I hit play, and And it has velocity forces built in, so on the more vigorous movement, we're going to start to get some really fun particle effects happening. And because we let it be still in that curve, we set it so we go back into our curve. Because it's still, there's no noise strength, it's giving us that shadow effect where it's just going to be still before it kind of dissolves. So if I don't want this to happen, so I'm not hitting any keys, this is just automatically happening every 5 seconds. If we want this to happen programmatically, we're going to need to take the emitter out of the system and create its own system. So I'm going to remove the shadow emitter from this system, and I'm going to create its own system. All right, so we're going to bring in that emitter. And we're going to make sure that we create this skeletal mesh. All right, and so what we're going to do is we're going to spawn this system programmatically, just like we did with the cone. So I'm actually going to delete all of this, and we're going to create a blueprint to do this. So instead of using the level blueprint, we're going to use an actor blueprint to handle this. And let's be organized and keep this all in separate folders. Great. All right, so we're going to bring in the skeletal mesh, and this is going to be Tyler. And because we're using a blueprint, we don't need to bring in the animation into the scene anymore. We can set the animation right here. So I'm going to go ahead and find that asset. Where is it? There it is. If I select the animation asset, and if I hit this little guy right here, now I have that animation asset. Now remember, we're going to want to set this as invisible, and it automatically is doing this always tick pose and refresh bones for us, which is nice. We're then going to add in our original system. Now notice that this is a child of this. See the indentation right here? We don't want that. We want this to be a sibling. So now they're siblings. So we're going to set this system to our original SK mesh system. So we got the particles, and we're going to spawn our shadow system inside of this. So we can get rid of all of this. So with our existing system, what we're going to do is we're going to do spawn system attached. So we're attaching our shadow system to our existing skeletal system. And this can happen on, I already used key P, so I'll use key 1. And because I'm doing key presses in an actor blueprint, I need to do enable input. And we'll do get player controller. All right. Great, so every time I hit the 1 key, it's going to create this shadow. Now, let's run it and see what happens. So I'm gonna open up blueprints and bring this in. There we go. I'm gonna hit play. He's dancing, he's dancing. I hit the 1 key. Now I've only hit the 1 key once. But every 5 seconds, I'm still getting these particles to emit. So what's happening, if we look in the emitter for our shadow, is we have this emitter life cycle. And the max loop is set to 0, which means it's looping infinitely. And I don't want that. I only want this system to spawn when I say so. So it's only going to loop once. So I hit the 1 key, it's going to dissolve, and it's not going to come back. All right, so now I hit play, and I'm gonna hit the 1 key now, and we can wait more than 5 seconds. It's not going to do anything on its own. It's only going to have this particle effect when I hit the 1 key, like right now, right now, right now. It's kind of fun. All right, so that's a fun thing. Another thing I want to show you guys today is ribbon tracing. Ribbon tracing is a really wonderful feature that they added in 4.21, and this entire particle system was only added in 4.20, so it's only about, as of this recording, a year-ish old. Year and a half, maybe. I'm going to go into FX, and I am going to save everything. Great. I'm going to add a new emitter, and we'll just stick with fountain as our kind of like base for today. All right, so I'm going to add in this ribbon, and we'll make a system. And we're also going to need a module script, so I'll just create that now. And we're going to create these nice ribbons that follow different parts of the body. All right, so I'm going to open up this emitter. I don't need any of this. But I don't need a mass. Don't need sprite rotation. Don't need this. Don't need this. I don't need this or this. Or this. Or this. And I don't want the sprite renderer, so we're not going to be doing these little circles, we're doing ribbons, and so it has its own ribbon renderer. And we'll search for ribbon, and we have this default ribbon material that we'll be using. All right, so what we're going to add is in the spawn, we want to add a couple variables. So let's go ahead and make this uniform. So we're going to add ribbon width, and we're also going to go ahead and we're going to add color. All right, and in the update, we are going to add the ribbon link order. This is going to be tied to the particle's normalized age, so you really don't have to worry about this. All right. So now we're going to go into that module script, and I have way too many tabs open, so I'm going to close all these. So let's go into the module script, and we are going to add a skeletal mesh. And we're going to do get skinned bone data. So we need a bone. So each ribbon is going to be attached to an individual bone in our skeleton. So bones are just integers. They're just numbers assigned to each bone that Unreal knows. We don't need to know what these numbers are. We'll handle that in just a minute. So we just need an integer. We're going to call this module.bone. All right. Great. And for positions, this will go to particles.position. We're also going to need a ribbon ID. We don't need to worry about this too much because there's this lovely handy feature called make ID, and this will take care of all of that for us. And we can call this bone tracking. And we're going to add this script to our emitter. So I'm going to add this to particle spawn. So again, that category, bone tracking, doesn't matter what you call it as long as you remember it. So here we go, bone tracking right here, and we're going to add in our script. And we're going to set everything to a user variable right now. So first thing is I need a user variable for the skeletal mesh. And the shortcut for renaming is F2, if you didn't know that. All right, tie that in. A bone is just an integer, so we're not going to look for bone, we're going to look for integer. And drag that in. And then we have color, so let's set that as a variable as well. It's a little confusing because you're going to look under color and it's not there. It's under linear color, is what you want. I don't think that's great UX, but that's just me. And then lifetime and ribbon width are both floats, so we'll add that in as well. And float for ribbon width. All right. So now this is all set up, even though we don't see anything. That's fine. We're gonna get there. So we're going to add this emitter into our system. And let's give some of these a default value. So we'll just leave it as white, that's fine. Lifetime we'll say 2, ribbon width we'll say like 15. And bone, I don't know the indices of all the skeleton bones off the top of my head, so I'll just say 100. I'm pretty sure that's a foot. Okay, so we have all this set up. We have absolutely nothing. We haven't set the skeletal mesh. We're going to create a blueprint to handle all of this. So go in my blueprints folder and we're going to make a new actor blueprint. So we're going to add a skeletal mesh. We'll make it Tyler. And again, we're going to use an animation asset. And let's find that animation. Again, selecting on the animation allows you to use this handy little feature. Now I have my animation, and we want to just make sure it's invisible. Unless you want to see it, that's fine too. I just want to have this like creepy set of trails and you have no idea where they're coming from. All right. And we're also going to add our system. In this case, we do want it to be a child. All right, so we're gonna have it be a child of the skeletal mesh here. So from our skeletal mesh, we're going to get the bone index. So we need a bone name. So if I look at my skeletal mesh and I click on skeleton, I have a list of how Unreal defines the skeleton. And let's just like pick the right hand. So I can just copy selected bone and just bring this in here. Yep. And we're going to set the user bone variable. So as you recall, we have this user bone variable. It's an integer. And this is where the ribbon is going to be initialized from. So it's going to be initialized from the right hand. So this is just taking the name, something that we recognize, and turning it into a number that we wouldn't recognize, but Unreal understands the number as the right hand. Do this on event begin play. All right, and then we're going to bring in that blueprint. And it's not happy. Let's see. Ah, we didn't set the system. That would be helpful. All right, so it's ribbon. There we go. Great. And now we have this ribbon that we can see is following the right hand. So if I wanted to add a lot of bones, I wouldn't want to painstakingly do this process for every single bone and have to set this and add a bunch of like systems. I'm gonna get messed up, right? So I'm not gonna do it this way at all. I'm gonna get rid of this. We're gonna create a variable and we're gonna make a list of strings, and these are gonna be all of the bone names that we wanna keep, all right? So bones, and this will be a list of strings. Actually, if we look at, this is taking a name which is similar to a string, but it's not, so let's just change it. All right, so we had right hand, might as well do the left hand, and head is in there. So you can add anything in this list as long as it occurs in this list. So I'm going to do right foot, and I'll do left foot. And I could do as many as I want, but that seems good for now. Okay, so I'm going to loop through all of these. And for each one, I'm going to spawn a system. And I'm attaching the system to my skeletal mesh. And then my skeletal mesh is going to get the bone index. And the index, instead of writing it out, it will come from my array. And then we're going to set our variable just like we did before. So I'm creating 5 distinct ribbon systems. And for each system, I am setting the variable to each bone occurring in the array. So when I run this, I should have 5 distinct ribbons that are attached to my dancing Tyler. All right, let's see if this worked. Variable name, and this is user.bone. All right, so we'll save. And let's hit play. And now I have 5 ribbons attached to my dancing Tyler. And if I turned Tyler on, i.e. if I made him visible, and let's put a light in here so I can really prove this point. We can clearly see that these ribbons are attached to his hands and his head and his feet. All right, let's get rid of that light, and I'm gonna make him invisible again. Okay, the very last thing I'm going to show you is a kind of happy accident when I was playing with these ribbons about a year ago, and I kind of call it chaos. So I'm going to make my last emitter and system for the day. And I'm actually going to copy this. And we're going to call this chaos. And then I'm going to make an empty system. Okay, great. So let's go into our emitter. So we don't want this ribbon script, but everything else looks good. We can keep this. And we're going to have our own script. We're going to make a module script called chaos script. So in 420, they didn't have the ability to pull this by bone, and I was trying to figure it out and made this by accident, but I kind of like it, so I wanted to show you guys. Yeah, we're going to do get. So we're going to do this get skin try data, and instead of feeding in an individual bone, we're just going to get a random coordinate. So it's going to bring a lot of chaos to our ribbons, and we'll see that in just a second. So we want to set this to the particle's position. There we go. And we'll call this chaos. All right. That looks good to me. Cool. So let's go ahead and bring that into our emitter. So we're going to bring this into particle spawn, called it chaos. So we'll bring that in. Great. And we'll set up a user variable. So we'll look for skeletal mesh. Awesome. Drag that in. All right, this looks good to me. We will, again, I have way too many tabs open. Let's bring this into our new system. So I'm going to bring the system into the world. I'm not going to make a blueprint. So I'm going to set to Tyler Dancing. So if you bring the system directly into the world and you're dealing with animations, the animation also has to exist in the world. We didn't need that when we were dealing with blueprints because we were able to set the animation directly. But if we aren't using blueprints, we're bringing the system directly into the world, we also need that animation. So we're going to bring that in. We are going to make it invisible, and we want this always tick pose and refresh bones. So we've set Tyler as the skeletal mesh. The source is going to be that animation sequence. And we're going to set the lifetime to something bigger than 0 and the ribbon width to something bigger than 0. All right. Let's see what happens. Nothing. Oh, it's hiding. It's all the way over there. All right, and there we have Tyler dancing with all of these like chaotic ribbons around him. All right, so those are a couple different ways to have fun with particles. I hope you guys enjoyed this and learned something new, and I'll see you next time.